Brazil has won 5 World Cups. That is the most of any nation in the entire history of football. But it isn't just the trophies. They have made every single World Cup tournament since the competition's inception. No other team on the planet has done that. Argentina has won 3. Germany has won 4. Italy has won 4. France has won 2. But absolutely nobody comes close to the mystical aura of Brazil's 5 World Cups. And it is not just about the numbers. Think about the absolute titans of the game that this country has produced over the years. We are talking about Ronaldo, Ronaldinho, Pelé, Garrincha, Zico, Romario, Rivaldo, Roberto Carlos. And today you have Neymar, you have Vinícius Jr, Rodrigo, and an ever-flowing river of generational talent. If you open TikTok or Instagram right now, you've probably seen the videos. A bunch of random guys and girls on the golden sands of Copacabana Beach, casually juggling a football. They keep it up in the air with their feet, their chests, their heads, and their shoulders. They don't touch it with their hands. And they do this for hours. They are juggling the ball like it is breathing, like it is second nature to them. Look away from the beaches and peer into the narrow, winding alleys of the favelas. You will see kids, some barely 10 years old, dribbling circles around each other with a level of skill that is honestly better than a lot of professional players in top-tier European leagues. You will see teenagers doing rainbow flicks over defenders on a tiny, cracked concrete field with totally microscopic goals. When you watch all this amazing control, this otherworldly relationship with the ball, you inevitably have to ask the question, what is going on there? What are Brazilians doing differently that makes them so uniquely, outrageously good at football? Why is it always Brazil? Why is Brazilian football heavily mythologized compared to literally every other footballing nation on Earth? I did some deep research. I looked past the highlight reels and the romantic stories, and in this video, I am going to break down exactly why it is so strange, yet incredibly logical, that Brazilians are the undisputed kings of the beautiful game. First, let's kill the genetics myth right now. The very first thing people reach for when they try to explain Brazilian football prowess is genetics. And look, I totally get it. When you watch Ronaldinho move on a pitch, it feels superhuman. He is so utterly weightless with the ball, so fast, so incredibly fluid. It almost looks like what he is doing shouldn't be humanly possible. It's easy to watch him and think, you just cannot teach that. He was born with a magical football gene. But here's what the actual science says. Brazil is one of the most genetically diverse populations on Earth. A massive 2015 DNA study of over 2,500 Brazilians found that on average, the population carries roughly 59% European ancestry, 27% African ancestry, and 13% Indigenous American ancestry. And those proportions shift dramatically depending on where you are in the vast regions of the country. In other words, Brazil is not one single genetic population. It's dozens of them, beautifully mashed together. Scientists at the Federal University of Minas Gerais specifically studied the performance-related genes of elite Brazilian soccer players in 2023. What they found was fascinating. Yes, these elite players did show genetic markers associated with extreme athletic performance. However, the researchers were incredibly quick to point out a crucial caveat. Those genetic markers only show up and activate under intense selective pressure from their environment, physical demands, and socio-cultural factors combined. In other words, the genetics are real, and they might give a slight physical edge, but that's just a starting point. It's a blank canvas. The actual masterpiece, the jaw-dropping soccer prowess, comes from everything else they're exposed to from the moment they can walk. So if it's not just the genes, what's the secret? Here's the thing that nobody outside of Brazil truly fully understands. The legendary players you're watching dominating on a massive 11-a-side grass pitch didn't learn to play on a full court. They learned to play on a futsal court. Futsal is played on a tiny, hard-floored indoor or outdoor surface, roughly the size of a basketball court. It's 5 players a side, and crucially, it's played with a smaller, heavier ball that hardly bounces. Futsal was actually invented in neighboring Uruguay in the 1930s, but it spread through South America very quickly. In Brazil, the great Brazilian soccer legend Pelé said it directly. He stated that futsal was fundamental in developing his ball work, his close control, his dribbling skills, and his passing. That futsal foundation helped lead Brazil to win 3 World Cups in 1958, 1962, and 1970, and Pelé played in all of them. Look at the modern era. Ronaldinho grew up playing futsal for Grêmio's youth team well before he ever touched a full-size pitch. The same goes for Neymar. The same goes for Ronaldo Nazario. Think of those iconic Brazilian moves, the elastico, the rainbow flick, the lightning-fast body feint. Those are not just natural gifts, they are specific futsal moves that these players mastered in tight spaces, which they then transferred onto the big grass pitch. To the rest of the world, it looks like magic, simply because nobody else learned the game the exact same way. Alongside futsal, there is another pillar of Brazilian football. It's harder to quantify with statistics, but I would bet my life it is just as important. In Brazil, it's called pelada. Pelada is basically a word for informal, lawless street football. There are no referees. There are no coaches yelling from the sidelines. There are no rigid tactical formations. It's just kids in a tight space playing football and trying to figure the game out for themselves. In the favelas, those kids play barefoot on concrete. They play barefoot on burning sand. They play barefoot on dirt and uneven ground littered with rocks. The surface changes constantly. The space is always too small. The goals are marked by a pair of old flip-flops. The rules are whatever you agreed upon before the game started. What does that environment do? According to researchers at Frontiers in Sports and Active Living, who published a peer-reviewed study on this exact phenomenon, this chaotic environment creates what they call affordances in skill acquisition. Basically, poverty and cramped, unpredictable environments force creative thinking and problem-solving on the pitch that a structured, perfectly manicured European coaching academy simply cannot replicate. Poor children, the study found, tended to focus much more intensely on football because they have significantly fewer other outlets or distractions. Football is not just a hobby in Brazil. It's not an after-school activity. It's the thing. It's life. There's a legendary quote from Didi, a brilliant Brazilian football player from the 1950s, that stayed with me ever since I started researching this topic. He said, "The boy who has an easy life does not have a chance in football because he does not know the value of food." This is not some romanticized poverty mythology to make a good movie script. That is a description of pure psychological motivation that structural research actually backs up. The players coming out of Brazil's favelas have always played with a hunger that is both literal and figurative. That hunger produces a kind of fearlessness. It breeds a strong willingness to try the impossible skill, to take that insane risk on the pitch, to humiliate a defender with a trick because they have absolutely nothing to lose. Comfortable players in affluent suburbs simply do not possess that same desperate burning fire. That instinct of necessity is where the unbelievable dribbling comes from. To make this abstract concept completely concrete, I want to tell you the stories of 2 specific players. The first is Ronaldo Nazario, famous as R9. He was my absolute favorite player. I watched him growing up during the 2002 World Cup, and he was nothing short of phenomenal. He's widely considered the greatest pure striker of all time. Legends like Zinedine Zidane, Lionel Messi, and Zlatan Ibrahimovic all point to R9 as the most complete attacking force they had ever seen. Ronaldo grew up in Bento Ribeiro, a rough working-class suburb in Rio de Janeiro. His parents separated when he was 11, and he dropped out of school shortly after. He spent his days playing on the streets of that neighborhood because there was simply nothing else to do. Here's a detail that gives me goosebumps every time I think about it. When Flamengo, one of Brazil's biggest and most historic clubs, invited a young Ronaldo for a trial, his family couldn't afford the bus fare to get him there. The academy was on the other side of the city, and they literally did not have the pocket change for a bus ticket. So he missed the trial. He ended up at a much smaller club called São Cristóvão instead. Think about what that tells you. The greatest striker in the history of the sport was nearly never discovered because his family couldn't afford public transport. But supreme talent cannot be hidden in Brazil. He was later spotted by Brazilian legend Jairzinho, signed by Cruzeiro at 16, scored 44 goals in 47 games, and was on the plane to the World Cup in 1994 as a 17-year-old kid. At 20, he was FIFA Player of the Year. In 2002, coming off 2 horrific, career-threatening knee injuries, he won the World Cup for Brazil, scoring 8 goals in the tournament. Then there's the story of Garrincha. You cannot talk about Brazilian football without talking about Garrincha. Garrincha was the biggest star of the 1962 World Cup when Brazil won it, stepping up massive because Pelé was injured early in the tournament. Garrincha was born in 1933 in Pau Grande, a small, heavily polluted factory town outside of Rio. From the moment he arrived in this world, his medical prognosis was grim. His spine was severely deformed, his right leg bent sharply outward, his left leg was 6 centimeters shorter than his right and curved inward in the opposite direction. Doctors told his family he'd likely never walk properly, let alone play competitive sports. His sister gave him the nickname Garrincha, which translates to little bird because of the awkward, disjointed way he waddled when he tried to walk. He started working in the local textile factory at 14. He only started playing competitive, organized football at age 19 because someone finally convinced him. Instead, they add tactical structure and physical conditioning around that individual flair. They preserve the kid's individual expression. They embrace the ginga, a deeply ingrained cultural concept derived from capoeira, an Afro-Brazilian martial art disguised as a dance. Ginga is about rhythm, fluidity, and swagger. The academies embrace this rhythm. To fuel these academies, clubs deploy enormous scouting networks. Scouts comb through local favelas, beach football tournaments, and futsal courts. In a massive country of over 215 million people, the net is cast incredibly wide. Almost every child with a spark of talent ends up in that pipeline eventually. From the street to the futsal court to the academy to the professional club to the iconic yellow jersey of the national team. So if the formula is that clear, why hasn't any other country replicated it? Some have tried. Spain produced an era of absolute dominance through their tiki-taka system, relying on their La Masia Academy, which birthed Messi, Xavi, and Iniesta. Germany completely rebuilt their football infrastructure after a humiliating Euro 2000 exit and mathematically engineered a World Cup win in 2014. But there is a fundamental difference here. Spain and Germany built systems. They designed technical frameworks and trained coaches to implement them. Systems can be copied. Brazil did not build a system. Brazil built a culture, and culture is impossible to replicate. Look at England. The Premier League is the richest league in the world. England has more money to throw at football than any other nation on earth. Yet, for the last 30 years, they have routinely been outplayed by technically superior teams. Why? Because historically, English football culture rewarded physicality, speed, and winning the second ball. In Brazil, the cultural template was a favela kid doing a rainbow flick over someone twice his size, simply because nobody told him not to. That absolute freedom of expression, built over a century of informal street football, produced a totally different kind of human on the pitch. You cannot manufacture that from scratch. You cannot buy the conditions that forged Garrincha, and you cannot build a European facility that creates a Ronaldinho. Brazilians are not the best because of their genes. They are the best because of a perfect storm, a cramped urban landscape, the lightning-fast nature of futsal, the ruthless freedom of street football,
a culture rooted in Afro-Brazilian rhythm and a burning desire to escape poverty through the only open door available to them. I grew up in Bangladesh. By all accounts, I shouldn't know or care about Brazilian football. But when I saw them play, it made me feel something deep in my soul. That enigmatic drop of the shoulder, the infusion of samba into a dead sprint, it is pure art. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. It takes a massive amount of time to research, write, and present these stories, avoiding the generic AI crap to give you something real. Thank you for watching and enjoy the World Cup.